Morning presented by Allstate. This is what we got today. We got Pavia's last party, we think. I think he's headed to the NFL or trying to. And not a single opt-out for Iowa. And if I'm not mistaken, Vanderbilt only has Eli Stowers. That's not going to be playing.
This might be the closest replication of like a real game that we can possibly see.
Meanwhile, Michigan and Texas have, I think, combined 60 players that will not play in that game. Everybody handles it a little bit differently.
You made the great analogy earlier about the scab, the replacement players in the NFL. You're wearing the jerseys, but I have no idea who these guys are.
That's the rest of those guys and the rest of the slate. Peter Burns, Chris Doering, joined right now by a man who always does a great job on ESPN.com recapping everything that went down in college football. He's part of the ACC network and part of our coverage this week of the college football playoff. David Hale. David, let's start with the Ole Miss side of this Sugar Bowl. You had an opportunity to talk to Trinidad Chambliss yesterday. What struck you as interesting in that combo?
Yeah, what's fascinating is, this is a guy who, as he noted, was playing this time last year for a Division II national championship. He's like, this is a little different over here. But, you would point to that and say, well, that's the quarterback position is something that is unique for Ole Miss because not only has Trinidad Chambliss not played on a stage like this before. Again, he's playing at Ferris State last year. Meanwhile, Gunnar Stockton has been in this very game and started this very game last year for Georgia. Advantage Georgia, maybe, but I think you start talking to Trinidad Chambliss and you see very quickly why it has worked out so well for him this year. He's a guy who looks the part, sounds entirely calm and confident, and seems to have a really good grasp on what he wants to do with the offense, despite all of the other controversies swirling around Ole Miss. He seems to be one of the steadying forces, which, again, I think really says something for a guy who the Sugar Bowl was not on his radar this time a year ago.
David, you mentioned the familiarity with the building that Georgia has with Gunnar Stockton having played there last year. It was not a great performance by he or the Georgia Bulldog team as a whole. Weird happenings last year with the terrorist attacks there. It felt like the whole experience was one that was very negative for them, including the ultimate loss they had. What can they draw from that experience? What have they done differently? How have they approached this one, being able to take away some of the things they did learn last year and apply it in a more positive effort this year?
Yeah, I talked to Kirby about this very thing, and I think by and large, the answer is not a whole lot. They kind of put it in the past, and for good reason in a lot of cases. But I do think the one thing that has been a difference this year is just realizing what it takes to be ready to play a game after having the better part of a month off. And we saw that not just for Georgia, but all four of the teams that had the bye week last year came out and kind of laid an egg in those first games. Now, is that a one-year sort of anomaly in the new 12-team playoff, or is that something we're going to see again? I think Kirby Smart very wisely has tweaked the way that they've prepared this week, just in the timing, the scheduling, how much time is devoted to sort of self-scout and improving themselves versus how much is put on to Ole Miss preparation. And one of the things Kirby said at the press conference today was like, there can be a thing as too much information and sort of streamlining what you're trying to do, even though you've got a lot of extra time to do as much as you want. So I think that's really the big difference. But if you look at sort of just the comparison between last year's Georgia and this year's Georgia, to me, I think that the caliber of offensive weapons that they have this year is just so much better. Zachariah Branch has given them a deep threat that I think did not really exist last year. The run game has been much more effective, and the offensive line has gotten much more of a push than they did. They really struggled with that last year. And so not as much as being put on Gunnar Stockton as it was certainly last year when he was making his first start in place of an injured Carson Beck.
Yeah, Noah Thomas being involved in that as well. David Hale joining us. And so, David, I'm curious because, and I like the fact that this feels more and more like Pete Golding's team, whereas in that first week it was all about laying this and all laying about that. But I'm intrigued about how this coaching staff at Ole Miss is trying to play double duty right now, including a tweet that we saw last night from Lane Kiffin saying, hey, my staff is out here working. What have you kind of learned about how that staff is playing two roles right now?
Yeah, and it's funny because I think this is true probably for both the staff that's leaving and the folks that are still here. And the answer that I've gotten is a lot of early mornings and a lot of, as Lane Kiffin's tweet alluded to, late nights, where the big portion of the day is spent on Ole Miss and winning football games here. The rest of the time, if you're leaving for LSU, you're meeting with Lane Kiffin, you're talking about recruiting and player retention there. Pete Golding's doing the same thing with the staff that he's trying to retain. And he said, look, have I put a ton into recruiting yet? No, I haven't. Have I made a ton of changes as to what I want my fingerprints on this program to be yet? No, I haven't. By and large, he's putting a lot of time into player retention, which is a big issue right now. And I talked to a few of the players that yesterday, frankly, said it's kind of unfair that coaches are already out and moving on to their next destination. We're sitting here looking at our watches, waiting to see what comes next for us. Look, it's a mess. There's no other way to put it. It's a mess that I think that they've done the best job that they can of getting through. And it helps that there was, I think, a lot of familiarity and consistency on the staff leading into this. A lot of these guys on this team, I mean, we're 3 months into the year. They know what they're doing. It's a lot of repetitive stuff. But you do have to ask, like, look, if Ole Miss goes out and gets beat badly by Georgia, that's going to be the topic of conversation. That tweet from Lane Kiffin will be retweeted again and again and again as people talk about, well, what happened to Ole Miss? Yeah, the coach left, and the coaches were half out the door.
In addition to that word now that he'll be in the building along with the governor, Jeff Landry, like how distracting. I mean, these storylines sound like they're fake, being written from like a Hollywood script. How distracting is his presence and him tweeting about the team, all of the things, and even, reported communication that's taken place? Do you find that to be somewhat distracting to the players that you've talked to?
Yeah, I don't see how it could not be. And it's not just, Lane doing it, because obviously Lane is Lane, and I don't think any of these players are surprised by who Lane Kiffin is or the things that he's apt to do or say. But it's unavoidable. I mean, look, every player who was out here yesterday doing interviews for the Sugar Bowl is being asked questions about Lane Kiffin and all the coaching transition and what are they going to do. I mean, one reporter had asked Trinidad Chambliss, have you talked to Lane Kiffin since he left? And he's like, I don't think that's allowed, which is fair. That doesn't mean it's not happening, though. And this is sort of where we're at. I mean, there's just no good way of doing this, and Lane Kiffin has never been one to sort of shy away from controversy. I mean, as you said, it sounds like a made-up script, except when it's about Lane Kiffin, there are no made-up scripts. He outdoes Hollywood in anything that they would write.
College football lives in a world of gray, and I mean, I think this story is all about it. My last one for you. You cover the ACC so well over on ACC Network. Miami, I got a chance to see them up close and in person at College Station, and they were fantastic. Every part of why Mario Cristobal wanted that team to go in there. What do you know about them going into this game against a Buckeye squad that, frankly, the last couple of times we saw them, weren't exactly firing on all cylinders?
Yeah, look, Ohio State's offense is markedly better, I think, than Texas A&M's is when it's firing on all cylinders. But we saw in that Big Ten championship game, what Indiana did to Ohio State is exactly the game plan that Miami can execute too. Miami's defensive front, I mean, Ruben Bain and Akeem Messidor and those guys are a problem. And I think they got after Marcel Reed and made him so uncomfortable and shut down A&M's ground game enough that even when they had a pretty bad offensive day themselves, the defense won the day. I think that can happen. Now, I think the job is bigger against Ohio State than it was against Texas A&M, but you're also playing on more neutral turf. You're not going to have the 100 and some thousand at Kyle Field screaming at you. It's not an ideal matchup, though, for Miami, I think, because the offense at Miami, if it gets into, I don't think it's going to be a shootout, but if it gets into a game that's in the 30s, that probably does not play into Miami's hand. Oddly enough, I think if they probably don't want to win 10-7 or 10-3 again, no. But if it's in the teens or low 20s, they probably wouldn't mind that game.
I was going to say it fit well for them last week, and you don't want Carson Beck throwing it probably 40 times. Sometimes that doesn't work out well for him. David, we appreciate the insight, and make sure that you get any more awkward photos like the trophies and the coaches earlier today. All right.
I want to sneak up behind him, give him bunny ears, a little some selfies. It'll be great.
He is great. He is David Hale. Make sure you follow his work over on ESPN.com and ACC Network. 833-814-0732. Let's get one other quick phone call in here before break. Gage is down in Georgia. Thanks for joining us here on SEC this morning. What's up, Gage?
This is the All-State Sugar Bowl. On one side, you have the number 3 Georgia Bulldogs, a team that has that, quote, hard-to-kill complex. And on the other side, the 6th-seeded Ole Miss Rebels, who are currently navigating the life after Lane reality. And, man, alive, did they look good. Their first time out. The stakes are enormous, a ticket to the college football playoff semifinals. But before we look at the game and the matchup, let's talk a little bit about kind of the narrative surrounding these two teams. Now, Georgia, they are the resilient machine. Kirby Smart has built a roster that treats the first 3 quarters of a football game as a light warm-up. I mean, they've trailed in 6 of their 7 regular season SEC wins. They were down 9 to Ole Miss in October and decided, nah, not today. They went and outscored them 17-0 in the final frame to win that game 43-35. They just stomped Alabama 28-7 for another SEC championship. They are kind of the been there, done that program of this era. And then there's Ole Miss. Now, their season's been a bit of a whirlwind, a record-breaking success. And then there were levels of betrayal where Lane Kiffin, the man who built the Lane train, he now heads to LSU. The Rebels did not crumble, though. They gave defensive coordinator Pete Golding the battlefield promotion to head coach, and Golding immediately tossed out some things that he didn't align with. And now they respond by smashing Tulane 41-10 in the first round. They're playing with a swag. They're playing with a chip on their shoulder. That chip on the shoulder is probably the size of a Mississippi catfish, man. I mean, they are fired up, and they are excited about this opportunity. Let's talk about the quarterbacks, the guys that are center. 2 quarterbacks that both finished in the top 8 of the Heisman Trophy voting. Gunnar Stockton finished 7th. Trinidad Chambliss finished 8th. This is elite level signal calling. Okay, Gunnar Stockton has been the steady hand for Georgia all season long. He is the model of efficiency, completing over 70% of his passes, 23 touchdowns against just 5 picks. But it's really his toughness that is his secret sauce. And against Ole Miss in October, he was a perfect 12 for 12 in the second half of that football game. He also added a 22-yard rushing touchdown in that game that left some of the Rebel linebackers wondering if they hit a brick wall. He is a weapon in the run game. Over 440 rushing yards, 8 touchdowns. So he is outstanding and the leader of this Georgia football team. On the other side, it's Trinidad Chambliss, who is a D2 transfer sensation. He won a national title at Fair State before he decided to hop in the portal and just find out, hey, is the SEC that tough? No, it can't be, right? I'll just hop right in and I'll be incredible. He wasn't even the starter until Austin Simmons got hurt in week 3. Now he's thrown for over 3,000 yards. He's electric. And against Georgia the first time, he moved the ball for 5 straight touchdowns to open the game. And then when Georgia's defense kind of found their magic there in the fourth quarter, Trinidad Chambliss really looked human. Started missing some throws. And if you look at where things are against pressure, he drops off a bit, still pretty good, completes nearly 50% of his passes against pressure, but he really needs to stay upright to win in this football game. He's got to be decisive. He's got to be timely. He's got to use his legs. He's got to play the best game of his career. They have great weapons, both these teams, but we will start with Georgia. If you like skill players, this game is your Christmas morning. Georgia's go-to guy is Zachariah Branch. He is a speedster, led the team with nearly 750 receiving yards, but he's at his best when he gets some space. He is lethal in that area. He's in the top 5 nationally in yards after catch. If you give him an inch, he takes the whole stadium. They have 5 others that all have 240 plus receiving yards. But there is an all-points bulletin that will be on Zachariah Branch in this matchup for Ole Miss because he's the guy that can really take it over if you give him some room. They're hopeful that Colby Young will be back, would be a huge coup. But if he's not, Zachariah Branch has already shown the ability, regardless of what's around him, to take over the game. Their running game is outstanding as well. They have Nate Frazier, a sophomore back who's sitting at 861 rushing yards. He's trying to become Georgia's first 1,000-yard rusher since 2019. That was DeAndre Swift. They also have some other capable pieces there at running back as well. They'll roll some guys, but it really starts with Nate Frazier. For Ole Miss, it starts with their workhorse, Kejuan Lacey. All-American, led the SEC with 21 rushing touchdowns. His 1,366 yards on the ground, 939 of those yards came after contact. He runs like he's trying to settle a personal grudge with the turf. He is excellent, and I think he is the biggest difference between last year's version of Ole Miss that was outrageously talented and this year's version that is far more capable of beating you in a bunch of different ways. In the passing game, they do a really good job of distributing the football. They force you to cover every weapon on the field. They have 5 receivers that have over 550 yards this year, and it starts with Harrison Wallace, who leads the team in receiving yards and receptions. DeJon Stribling is the primary target as they approach the red zone. He's got 6 touchdowns. You can't ignore the speedster Deuce Alexander, the slot magician in Caden Lee, and the matchup nightmare that is Daquan Wright. This is a really good group of wide receivers, and what makes them difficult is they've all taken their turn. So you want to take away Wallace, fine. Here comes Caden Lee. You want to take away Caden Lee? Perfect. Here's Deuce Alexander. You want to take Deuce Alexander away? Fine. Here's Stribling. Cool. You want to play man? All right. Here's Daquan Wright. He can beat you as a tight end. They are really good across the board. Let's talk about the way that this Georgia defense has evolved this year, because they've changed drastically. Kirby Smart and Glenn Schumann, they took a really talented group, a raw unit, and they really trained them over the course of the season to turn into hunters. And you can see it in their stances. You can see it in how they've adjusted. They look ready to pounce. Look, their star is CJ Allen. He's at the second level. Their junior linebacker, leads the team in tackles. He's arguably the most capable run defender in the SEC. And Georgia has allowed only 34 second half points in regulation all season. So if you don't beat them by halftime, they're like the anaconda that just keeps squeezing as the game goes along. Now, they don't have the ridiculous depth that they once had, but they're extremely well coached, and they have shown tremendous improvement this year. If you look at Georgia's havoc rates, their defense this season against Power 4 competition, in their first 6 games, 32% pressure, 5 sacks, 5 takeaways. So not very impressive in their first 6 games against Power 4 teams. In their last 4, their pressure rate has increased by 10 percentage points, up to 42%. Their sacks have doubled, and they have 4 takeaways in 2 less games. So they have been much more disruptive here in the final 4 games of the season. So tremendous credit needs to go to that coaching staff and those players into evolving into a group that can really hurt you in a lot of different ways. For Ole Miss, Pete Golding's defensive brain has been great this year. Their strength starts up front. They have excellent defensive line play, with Will Eccles and Xavier Harris being the defensive tackles. They've been outstanding all year. Cam Franklin's become a real primary disruptor off the edge. He's got 3.5 sacks, but he does have a decent amount of quarterback pressures, so his impact in this game will be felt. And they also have Sunterian Perkins, who has outstanding speed. He had 2.5 tackles for loss against Tulane. The problem is they don't have a ridiculous amount of depth. When they played Georgia the first time, Eccles and Perkins played 74 snaps each. Franklin and Harris each played 63 snaps. Their defensive line play, it dips once you get past the 40 snap mark. So to defend 60 plus is a really tall order. That's why things dropped off for them so significantly in the first matchup. So the goal is simple. Make Gunnar Stockton uncomfortable, force him to make some mistakes that he hasn't made all year, and find a way to get off the field ASAP. Because if they don't, that could be a huge problem. Look, there are a couple, distractions surrounding this matchup for Georgia. Their starting right guard, Dontrell Glover, and a backup running back got arrested on a misdemeanor. The list of items: air fresheners, Febreze, pizza rolls, Gatorade. Like, I looked at the list. I'm like, this to me felt like it was a mistake. It was not. I don't think there was anything. I don't know. I have no idea. But to me, I would expect him to go. Glover has started 11 straight games. But if for whatever reason he isn't available, that could be significant, because Georgia could also be without Drew Bobo, who has been hurt. He's their starting center. So communication could be tested in the event in which Bobo is not back in this game. And then lastly, Gabe Harris, their defensive end, is also apparently dealing with turf toe that could be problematic as well. For Ole Miss, the biggest concern as far as health is Kejuan Lacey. He got banged up a little bit against Tulane. He tried to fight through it, but their running back depth is a little bit thin. Now, Logan Diggs, he had just 29 carries in the regular season. So if Lacey can't be that 20 carry a game monster that he usually is, then the Rebels offense could be playing chess without a queen. Every move is suddenly 10 times harder because they lost the one piece that could cover the whole board and bail them out of a bad position. Let's look at some of the technical matchups in this game. Georgia's strength is the red zone, and that's a nightmare for Ole Miss because Georgia scores on over 90% of their red zone trips, but they score a touchdown on 79% of those red zone penetrations. That is the second best in the entire country. They are so good at finishing drives. Ole Miss's strength is just their total offense. They're second nationally in yards a game at just under 500 yards a game. They're 10th in scoring, so they'll play fast, they'll play angry, they'll utilize 8 different weapons in the passing game, but the mismatch is the rushing defense. Georgia is 4th in the FBS in rushing defense. They allow just 79 yards a game on the ground. Ole Miss normally runs for about $185, but in their last meeting, Georgia held Ole Miss to just 88 yards. So if Georgia makes Ole Miss one-dimensional, it could be challenging in the fourth quarter. Ole Miss's weakness is the turnover margin. They are -2 in the regular season. Now, in a playoff game against Kirby Smart, a -2 margin is a death sentence. So you cannot give extra possessions. They got to be smart with the football. They are back to even based on their performance against Tulane. But if you look at quality competition, being smart is the #1 priority for Trinidad Chambliss and the Rebels offense. Let's go to the questions. I have 8 of them. Number 1, can Gunnar Stockton's efficiency picked up where it left off against the Rebels? In the last meeting, he was flawless in the second half. And Pete Golding has got to find a way to break that rhythm. So if Stockton can sit in the pocket and pick them apart, it'll be very tough sledding. Question 2, can Kewan Lacey continue to be the biggest difference maker? Is he healthy? That's the first question. If he's only at 70%, 80%, then Georgia's linebackers can focus entirely on the pass. Ole Miss needs Lacey to keep the dogs honest at the very least. Question 3, how much will Ole Miss have to sell out to stop the run? You can expect Georgia to commit to Nate Frazier and the ground game to wear down the Rebels' 66th ranked rushing defense. If they can effectively establish the run, then they can elevate the snap exposure to the Rebels' defensive line. They have great personnel, but they are human and they will tire. So if the run for Georgia gets established early, fatigue will eventually set in, and that's not a good recipe for the Ole Miss Rebels. Question 4, can Georgia limit the big plays defensively? We know that Georgia's pass rush is improved, significantly improved, but it hasn't necessarily shown up in sacks. They still have just 20. They're 102nd in college football. But will it be enough to stop the big plays downfield for Ole Miss? Because Ole Miss has 83 plays that went for 20-plus yards this year. That's top 3. Georgia must keep the ball in front of them in this matchup. Question 5, can Ole Miss contain Zachariah Branch? Branch has nearly 600 yards after the catch this year. Ole Miss cannot miss tackles in the open field. So if Branch turns a 5-yard slant into a 40-yard gain, the Superdome's going to get real quiet for the Rebel fans. So they got to tackle him because he's going to find room, he's going to find space, but you can't allow the long catch and runs. Question 6, can Georgia maintain its red zone dominance? We already hit it. Georgia is beastly in the red zone, #2 in the FBS. They are a 100-car freight train that is on a downhill grade. It's not about finesse. It's not about strategy. It's about 50,000 tons of physics that has decided that the train tracks belong to them, and it feels like that. It's like they're going downhill when they get in the red zone. Can Ole Miss somehow force them to kick field goals and not allow them into the end zone? Because this might be a high-scoring affair. So if they can, that would be very, very valuable. Question 7, can Ole Miss win the middle 8? You're probably wondering what the middle 8 is. It's the last 4 minutes of the first half and the first 4 minutes of the second half. Georgia's been really good in those areas this year. They're plus 29 in the last 4 minutes of the second quarter. They're plus 14 in the first 4 minutes of the third quarter. So Ole Miss needs to win that to avoid the outstanding second half resilience that we've seen from Georgia this season. And then question 8, can Ole Miss start fast and hang on? Ole Miss needs to jump Georgia early. They are plus 71 in the first quarter this year. That is third best in college football. And Georgia's been pretty human in the first quarter. They're just plus 18. You're thinking, well, that's pretty good. That's 56th in college football. But after that, that's when they become ridiculous. They're plus 190 in quarters 2, 3, and 4. That's top 9. They're probably the best adjusters in the FBS, and they're plus 46 in the fourth quarter. And the last time Ole Miss and Georgia teed it up, that's where the game was won and lost. Georgia outscored Ole Miss 17-0 in the final frame. And ironically, the Rebels have been great in the fourth quarter this year, but this is a next level test. So who will start fast? Who will finish strong? That could very well determine the outcome. Look, this game is a battle of styles. Ole Miss is high flying. They have great weaponry. They have a nothing to lose energy of a team that has survived a coaching divorce. Trinidad Chambliss has enough to make this game a shootout. Georgia is absolutely a different animal, and Kirby Smart is 4-0 in rematches. There's a reason why this team is hard to kill. Their situational efficiency, especially in the red zone, in the fourth quarter, they are the gold standard when it comes to those things in college football. So Ole Miss needs to start fast, and it should be a highly entertaining football.